Capitol Hill is on high alert today because of new threats of violence from alt-right extremist groups. As a precaution, House lawmakers are not meeting today in person. March 4th is considered an important date for some pro-Trump extremists who believe the former president will somehow retake office. Capitol Police have requested the National Guard stay in place for the next 2 months. This week, the FBI warned January's violent attack was unlikely to be an isolated incident. The insurrection killed one police officer and injured dozens more. CBS News congressional correspondent Chris Van Cleve has the latest.
The nation's capital on high alert after a federal intelligence bulletin warned a group of militia violent extremists discussed plans to take control of the U.S. Capitol and remove Democratic lawmakers on or about March 4th.
We do have some concerning intelligence. That intelligence is law enforcement sensitive. We've taken immediate steps to let the National Guard as well as our workforce know what to expect.
Acting Capitol Police Chief Yogananda Pittman briefed lawmakers yesterday.
We know that the threats are through the roof.
Facebook confirms it is monitoring efforts to attempt or coordinate actions tied to a QAnon conspiracy theory that former President Trump will rise to power today. These latest threats come as confusion continues over the timeline of the January 6th attack. Major General William Walker, the commander of the D.C. National Guard, told senators he received a frantic call at 1:49 p.m. that day from then Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund.
Chief Sund, his voice cracking with emotion, indicated that there was a dire emergency at the Capitol, and he requested the immediate assistance of as many available National Guardsmen that I could muster.
But he said it took more than 3 hours to get the Defense Department to approve sending troops to the Capitol.
Seconds mattered, minutes mattered.
Walker blamed the unprecedented and slow response on the Pentagon.
The Army senior leaders did not think that it looked good, it would be a good optic. They further stated that it could incite the crowd.
He was asked if that same consideration had been made last summer when the Guard was also called to respond to Black Lives Matter protests.
It was never discussed the week of June. It was never discussed July 4th when we were supporting the city. It was never discussed August 28th when we supported the city.
And CBS News congressional correspondent Chris Van Cleve joins us from Capitol Hill to talk more about the threat. Hi, Chris. So how exactly is law enforcement and the National Guard responding to today's threat? What are you personally seeing around the Capitol?
Tanya, good to be with you this afternoon. And what you notice when you're coming into the Capitol now, there's obviously a fence line perimeter. It's rung by razor wire up across the top of the fence now. And there are checkpoints where you can come in and out of the Capitol, vehicles and pedestrians. Normally there's a couple of officers, a police car there. Today there were many more officers and they were much more heavily armed officers. You saw assault-style rifles, shotguns with the officers. I saw one officer walking in with his riot helmet in his hand. The National Guard presence also noticeably stepped up. There were far more soldiers patrolling the fence line, walking the congressional campus this morning than we have seen even earlier this week. So it was a clear tightening of security. Even with all of the fortifications that are already up, the razor wire and the fence line, as well as the additional police. So we know that's going on. Also, if you walk through some of the office buildings, particularly on the House side, you could roll a bowling ball down the hallways because the House opted to finish all of their scheduled work that they were going to do today, last night. Staff have been encouraged, both House and Senate staff, have been encouraged to telework today and tomorrow if they can. So there are fewer people around the Capitol complex than we have seen. And already there are fewer people here than there would normally be because of the pandemic. So it is a noticeable difference today. But inside the security perimeter, inside the buildings, it feels pretty normal. When you step outside the buildings, you see a much more elevated presence of security, a very visible message being sent.
And Chris, is some of that sort of visible security, such as the wire fencing you described with the razor wire, was that put up for the inauguration and just never taken down?
The fencing went up after the January 6th attack. and has remained. It's supposed to stay until at least the end of March, as we're hearing about the potential of the National Guard mission being extended. It is likely that you'll see some kind of barricade extended as well. That's one of the big debates up here. You have a number of lawmakers who don't like the fence line. The people that live in the communities near the Capitol really don't like the razor wire on the top of the fence line. So there had been some talk about removing some of that prior to this threat. The barrier remains a real point of contention, not only with lawmakers, but with the larger community. But for the time being, it is staying put.
And remind us again why today is a significant date for some of these conspiracy-minded, extremists such as QAnon and other groups. Specifically, why do they believe today is a significant day?
So prior to the 20th Amendment, March 4th was the day the United States inaugurated a new president. And the 20th Amendment moved that to January in part because it resulted in a really long lame duck period where you'd had an election in November, but you had the outgoing president until March. So March 4th is the traditional or original inauguration day, and that is a fact that these QAnon conspiracy theorists have latched onto as claiming that this is the day that former President Trump comes back to power. That's not happening, but that's led a lot of chatter leading up to this week. That this is a day that some extremists, somebody, perhaps a lone wolf, somebody might use as justification to act. And that certainly became the concern again yesterday here on campus.
It seems what makes security on Capitol Hill so difficult is that these dates are sort of moving targets. These conspiracy-minded groups keep moving them, kicking the can down the road, as it were, when whatever they predict inevitably does not come true. And there had been some confusion over some of these threats. Earlier this week, the officials said the threat was low for this date, and then 24 hours later, a new bulletin alerted to a heightened threat. Is there any indication what's behind some of the intelligence confusion?
Look, all of the leadership that was involved with January 6th, most of them are no longer in their jobs, but they've all, the one thing they all agree on is that there were intelligence failures. But there continues to be a lot of discrepancies in what happened when and why on the 6th. And what we have seen in the hearing since is that there are multiple agencies that are sort of have a hand in security up here. You have the United States Capitol Police, you have the Sergeant at Arms for the House and the Senate. And what we have seen is these groups are not necessarily in lockstep with their messaging, and that seems to continue. You had the House Sergeant at Arms on Tuesday send a notice to staff saying it appeared the threats around the 4th were decreasing, and less than 24 hours later, you had the FBI and DHS pushing out a bulletin saying that the threats were back. The Capitol Police coming out with an alert that the threats were back. So, which then had the House Sergeant at Arms reverse course and put out a new memo saying the threats were back. It does appear that there continues to be either a lack of coordination of the messages or folks are reading the same intelligence differently, and it's leading to communications that are very, very different. I mean, Tuesday you went from you can take a sigh of relief here to a noticeable increase in concern on Wednesday, and the Capitol Police Chief telling lawmakers that they've stepped up enforcement because of whatever this intelligence says.
Leaves everybody a little bit back on their heels and a little not too sure of what could happen. All right, well, Chris Van Cleve, thank you so much for joining us. Chris Van Cleve on Capitol Hill.
Sure thing.